You're very welcome back to the programme. Well, now to car clocking. It is estimated that 15% of Irish cars are clocked. That is, that they've had their mileage reduced to make them look like a better prospect when they're being sold. Well, up to now, only dealers could be prosecuted for clocking, while private sellers were getting away with it. Now, this is going to change. Well, I'm joined by Michael Rochford from Motorcheck.ie. Michael, thank you very much for coming in to us. 15% of cars clocked. Where does this figure come from? How do you know?
Yeah, we've done some research in Motorcheck.ie. We looked at about 100,000 used cars over the last number of years that were offered for sale, and we found discrepancies on up to 15% of those cars. So when you look at the number of transactions that happen on the Irish used car market every year, that could be up to 75,000 used cars that are offered for sale every year are clocked. 75,000
cars a year clocked. And it's pretty easy to get your car clocked, isn't it?
Yeah, today with modern cars, it's no more than plugging in a laptop into the central computer under the bonnet. So it's much easier now with modern cars to have a car clocked than it was in previous years when you'd really need someone to take apart the dashboard and physically wind back the odometer.
Yeah, and they always looked a bit off, didn't they? There were ways of telling when a car was clocked in the olden days, if you like. Now, would you have any idea that a car had been clocked if you didn't go back through its service register?
Well, there are always telltale signs to look for. Abnormal wear and tear on the vehicle.
Where in particular would you look? The pedals?
Yeah, you'd look at the pedals, the carpets, the steering wheel. Is there? It has the steering wheel been smoothed over, the gear lever, things like that. You know, there's always telltale signs to look for. But you know, you should always get the car checked, obviously, through a service such as Motorcheck to see if there are any historical readings. Look at the service book as well. Mileages are printed on the NCT certificates as well, so look at those. Ask for previous NCT certificates.
Oh, I see, yeah. So if, for example, it had only put on 2 miles in 5 years, you'd have a fairly good idea of being clocked.
Absolutely.
Or, I mean, there have been examples of cars that have gone backwards in their mileage as well, haven't there, even with the NCT certs?
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's what clocking is, effectively. It's the car's mileage being wound back and for the purpose of artificially inflating the value of the car. And there's a huge exposure there. I think we did some research into it, and we found that it was costing the Irish motorists about 60 million a year in inflated prices that the Irish motorists were paying for their cars.
That's the amount that extra that they were paying for these cars that they shouldn't have been paying because they had such high mileage.
Absolutely, and not to mention the repair costs in the future. If you discover you're driving a clocked car and it's giving you trouble because there's a lot more mileage on it than you think there was, it's bound to run into trouble later on down the road. But also we discovered we put some of those vehicles through tests with automotive engineers and ran diagnostics on them, and we discovered that not only is the mileage obviously wound back, but because the car's central computer has been interfered with, it actually disables some of the safety features and warning lights on the car.
So it's more implications than just ripping you off.
It's a serious risk.
If you want to get your car clocked, it's still very simple to do it, isn't it? There's people who advertise as, what are they calling themselves?
They're the so-called mileage correction agencies or experts.
And these are freely advertising at the moment. There's no rules against these.
No rules.
I mean, that's incredible.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're hoping that these changes will deal with that. What exactly has changed?
Well,
now?
it's a criminal offence, or it will be a criminal offence once the legislation is enacted, to either tamper with the odometer yourself or procure someone else to tamper with the odometer and wind it back. There's allowances in there for legitimately doing it, because sometimes you need to repair a vehicle and the odometer needs to be replaced, and it comes back to zero effectively. There's various allowances in there for that sort of thing.
But they're kind of unusual cases.
Yeah,
but it does seem extraordinary that up to now only dealers could be done for this, when people were freely advertising these mileage correction services. Yeah. So you were not committing any kind of criminal offence if you were selling a car with 10,000 miles less than it actually had on it?
No, not at all. And in fact, it was difficult to bring any prosecutions even against dealers, because the whole thing was under the consumer legislation and under misleading practices. So there was a huge burden of proof, and the National Consumer Agency was tasked with going after or policing that whole area, and they had a huge burden of proof on them to go and prove these misleading practices were going on, and brought a few. They did, in fairness, bring a few successful prosecutions against dealers, but it was very, very difficult and very hard going.
And you'd imagine it's the private sellers, because it doesn't cost much to go to one of these mileage correction agencies at all, does it? And it could mean thousands extra on the. I sound like I'm advertising them now. But when are these rules coming into place?
Well, it's gone through. The amendment was proposed yesterday by the Minister. It was unanimously accepted. It has to go through the Seanad, and in the next few weeks then the legislation is expected to be enacted.
So hopefully that'll be the end of clocking.
Yes, hopefully.
Hopefully. Well, listen, thanks very much indeed for coming in to us this morning.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well,